Okay, sorry about that. I should have pressed record earlier. So anyways, as we're doing a little activity now. So imagine your child's coming home for the holidays and maybe they're very responsible, they're kind and empathetic. They are a great problem solver. Maybe they've kind of figured out a career path and they're very independent and passionate about what they do. Maybe they're creative, they're a out of the box thinker, they're an effective communicator, maybe they're very loyal and honest and respectful. They're emotionally stable and they've developed some emotional healthy habits and they're very compassionate. So let that marinate for a minute. And I want you to go ahead and sit up, make your back straight, roll your shoulders back. You can put your hands on your lap. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your nose. We'll do one more time because we never take enough deep breaths through the day. In through the nose and out through the nose. Go ahead and take your hands and tap them on your lap for a couple of seconds. And then you can put your hands up like this. And you're going to make two little circles. And go ahead and put them on your chin. Put them on your chin. Okay, I saw some of you do this, some of you do this. So what did I just demonstrate here? I told you to put them on your chin. Anyone? Feel free to unmute. We're a shy group today. No wrong answer here. So what I demonstrated here is that we tend to follow more of what we see than what we hear. And why is that? Does anyone know? Why do we follow more of what we see than what we hear? Any ideas why that is? No, it's okay. Well, Dr. Maria Montessori based her educational methodology on human development. And she believed that mirror neurons pruned throughout brain development, of a child really confirm the idea that children learn best through their environment, by absorbing, by observing, by repeating. And Dr. Maria Montessori discovered this through observations a very long time ago. But it was later confirmed by a neuroscientist in the late 90s. And so not only did she believe in the prepared environment, but she believed in the prepared adult. And so when adults have access to be present within themselves, they're really prepared for any situation. And so if we stop to really think about this, parents are the first community for a child. And you can really see the impact that parents have, that teachers have, right? Anyone that's interacting with children have on their development. And so are we modeling those skills that we hope our children will develop by the time they're 25 or 26 and they have a fully developed brain? And so since you're here, I'm guessing, you really want what's best for your child. You want to kind of be the best version of yourself for them and have more fun and just less frustrating moments as much as possible, right? And what I want to do is give you that path to really take what you have already known through your experiences or maybe what you've read about. Because one thing I know as a coach is just because the information we have it at our fingertips, it doesn't mean that it equals transformation. And so sometimes because we've read all the books or we follow these amazing leaders online, we know we end up feeling worse about ourselves. And so for a very long time, parents have been asking the same question. You know, how do I get my kids to behave? How do I get them to listen to me? What do I need to do to get out the door on time? Why is my teenager ignoring me? And I really believe that we reached a point because we have all this information and we know more about child development and emotional intelligence. There's just so much information out there that we really have to start to look at this question through a different lens. And so, that's really what I did when I left the classroom to support parents on their journey. I saw that there is a need to create a safe space free of judgment where adults can really just learn more tools and achieve their goals. And it's just really about asking a different question. And so, instead of asking the question, like, how do I get my kids to behave? How do I change the behavior of another person? The question that I lovingly ask adults and parents and teachers, or the question I ask myself every single day is, as a mom or a dad or a caregiver, it's just how, how can we turn the mirror around and look at our roles differently, you know? And I'm going to talk about that new game in just a minute, but it really doesn't matter how old your children are. I have clients that have babies all the way through teenagers. And it's just more about when we begin to make that transformation, what our children see around us, they begin to absorb that and make the changes as well. And so to continue on, I believe, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to just be willing to look at your own reactivity, your own communication style, or maybe inconsistency of expectation that's happening in your life. It's easier to blame it on the kids, right? Oh, it was my middle son, or oh, it was just they're difficult. It's easier to blame it on the children. But, I'm just going to invite you to have a lot of compassion as we start to talk about these things. So, in just a moment, I'm going to invite you to just type in the chat which parenting obstacle, which of these four, maybe there's a few that you're currently facing. Okay. So, number one, you're often not in the right state of mind to be able to connect with your children and to access better discipline tools. And so, when you're feeling those moments, when you're feeling your feelings, are you stuffing them down and not letting yourself feel them? Or are you expressing them in a way that's maybe harmful to yourself or to your children? And so when we think about harming another person, obviously we think physical, but also, emotionally and spiritually, are you chipping away, at their self-confidence, at their worth, at their right to have a voice? And I believe this is a huge part of why there's so much disconnect in the world. A lot of us have not learned how to express ourselves in a nonviolent way. And so, what we do know, though, is that connection leads to cooperation. Number two is you're not sure how to replace unproductive parenting tools such as yelling or threatening or punishing or maybe even permissiveness. And so a lot of recent research, really is telling that, yelling at your kids is equally impactful as spanking them. And so, maybe you're wanting to do things differently, but you kind of struggle with a different way and you kind of revert back to yelling. Maybe that was done to you, or maybe that's just kind of this pattern that you're stuck in. Number three is you don't know how to sustain parent-child connection for long periods and recover from those breakdowns. So the parent-child relationship sets the foundation for every relationship that child will have in their life. So yeah, it's kind of a lot of pressure, right? And it's because of something I teach very deeply in my program. It's an attachment style. And so this is of all humans. So there's, a disorganized attachment style, and there's a, there is an anxious attachment style. And so a lot of us who were not raised with that secure attachment may start to develop like toxic relationship patterns. That's where like codependency comes from. It's where people pleasing comes from. And so all of those are rooted from the primary parent child attachment. And so connection is really just comes from you as the parent with that fully developed brain staying regulated when your child is having a big storm, is what I like to call them. And so children, you can't correct before you connect. So when they're in their storm, and sometimes parents will go into lecture, or they're not grasping what you're trying to say at that moment. And so really just staying regulated before you move into correction is important, and connection sometimes can be different, very different for children. They're wired very differently than us. I can tell you for personally, my middle son, his idea of connecting, he loves to debate and talk, about sports and argue, and that's his idea of connecting. That's how he feels seen and heard and valued. It's not my idea, but I've had to learn to participate in that with him because that's how he feels connection. So a lot of times connection can look very different for what a child feels than what a parent or adult feels. Um, and so, yeah, sometimes it can feel the same way, right? You can have that connection in a different way. Um, and then number 4 is you repeatedly treat the misbehavior without addressing the root of the behavior. So do you get triggered when your kid is like, you just want it to stop, whatever they're doing, you just want it to stop, and you're not really getting curious about what could be going on. And maybe your responses and choices are influenced by what other people think, because maybe you feel embarrassed or you feel judged, and so that is influencing you to kind of, just kind of shut it down, just shut down the behavior. And so I believe when we get more confident with our responses and our interactions with our children when they're misbehaving, because we've discovered what the root is, and we start to really care a lot less about what other people think because we know really what's going on with our child. And it's a really interesting perspective to look at, because if children model the behavior that they see, and we all have those mirror neurons, which children literally mirror the way that their parents respond to the world, to stress, to challenges, other relationships, right? Then doesn't it make sense that we do the work on becoming the person that we want our children to eventually be? And so in the chat, judge-free zone here, go ahead and type the number or numbers of parenting obstacles that you are currently facing. And Francesca, maybe you can read some of those out loud. You don't have to say the names, you can just say the numbers. A lot of us are probably dealing with the many of the same obstacles. And so, just know that this is a safe space to talk about that.
Okay, did you want me to do, I have 2 in the chat. Do you want me to say out the numbers?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I have one parent that says number 1. I have another parent that says 1 and 3, and then another parent that says 3.
So we have 2 1s and 2 3s. So not being feeling like you're in the right state of mind. Maybe are you feeling overwhelmed or stressed or exhausted? And maybe the to-do list is calling your name and you're just feeling like, you're just overwhelmed. Is that, you can give me a thumbs up? Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say? Hearing you feel? And then for 3 is, when sustaining that parent-child connection for long periods or recovering from those meltdowns. Okay, I really appreciate you sharing. That's awesome. Does anyone have any questions so far? I'm gonna definitely dive into this more, but so far, does anyone have any questions? And feel free to unmute. Okay.
Yeah, may I comment? Is that
Sure.
okay?
Absolutely.
I know as a parent, mother of 3, it's hard for us, especially where for the most part we have our children, we have our work, we have our home life, we have a lot of things going on, and we're all trying to juggle everything, trying to be super women here. And I think we earned that badge that we are super women here. But it is a little bit difficult because when things, kind of like hit the fan with so many different things that's hitting you, life is hitting you, your kids and their problems, work and their problems, or family life or whatever, it does get a little bit overwhelming, and sometimes we need an outlet, and I
Absolutely.
feel, with my experience having 3 kids living under the same household, it's like they're not the same. Every single one of them had different personalities, and you're just trying to juggle that and then, make improvements and adjustments for every child. So basically, my 3rd child is actually has the better of me. My first
Aw.
child, oh my gosh, I feel bad for him. Second one, I'm learning, I'm adjusting things and whatever. And now I know from the first 2, it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this, but I'm not gonna do that. I adjust things,
Yeah.
but then still life, still hits you with other stuff. And it's an everyday cycle, and I feel, sometimes, you're at that limit sometimes. And some people may shut down and some people may just like blurt it all out,
Yeah.
and then they show by emotions. And
Mhm.
then unfortunately, whoever's that target person in front of you, that's the person who's going to get the worst of it.
Yeah.
Most of the time maybe it could be hubby, but
Right.
poor him.
Sure. No,
But
I totally hear what you're saying, Francesca, and thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable. I want you to know that you are not alone, right? We are parenting in a very modern day and age. It's a very fast pace. A lot of what we are dealing with was not around 15, 20 years ago, or even when our parents parented us. It's a very different ball game. And our children as well, right? They're born into technology. They're born into this kind of world that's all they know. It's everything's instant, everything's quick. And you're right. A lot of times it's like a tea kettle. It just ends up spilling, right? Because we're human. We're not um, we're not robots. We have our limits.
feel
And
emotions, yeah.
so, I just want you to know that these 4 obstacles here are very common and they're very present. And I'm going to go into them a little bit more, but I appreciate you sharing that. And one thing I just wanted to say before, just to add on what you said, is I tell my children this all the time, especially my oldest. I'm like, I'm raising you, but you have also raised me. And so
Mhm.
it's
Yes.
definitely a learning process for sure.
Mhm.
And every child, you kind of grow a little bit more and you learn a little bit extra. Um,
Yes.
so obviously there's a missing link here, right? Because we all have all this information at our fingertips and we've read the books, but yet we still lose it. We still lose our temper. We reach that boiling point and we are completely dysregulated. And so I want to talk about what is missing here. It has everything to do with the subconscious conditioned patterns of our behavior. And so, how many of you have tried to use your willpower? Maybe, because it's 2024, you told yourself, I'm not going to yell at my kids. It's a new year, it's a new resolution. And then you reach your point, and what do? You yell, right? And we all reach this point sometimes. Oh, somebody's in the chat. And it's not because we're bad. It's not because we suck at life. It's because we're human, right? We all have this truth that we need to live with, and that's that 95% of actions and behaviors are driven by the subconscious mind, especially when we're under resourced, when we're stressed, when we're overwhelmed, when we're hungry, right? Or worried or overwhelmed. And so you really, I think I read somewhere, you only have like 2 hours worth of willpower per day. And after that, you're left to your defenses. And so, what's driving this? The actions that we take 95% of the time is informed by our childhood experiences, our beliefs, our worldview. It's essentially like an operating system that's built on our past. And it's not really wired to create things for the future. It's really wired to protect us from failures, from trauma, from struggles that we've experienced. And it's a good thing if we're in danger, right? Like our body just knows what to do, but it doesn't really help us for making things going into the future. And so, we really are seeing life and really, our child and life through this distorted lens of our past and our fears and our disappointments. It's really how you can see two people in a car experiencing the same thing, and one is like complaining about the traffic and the terrible drivers, and the other person is admiring the beauty outside. Two people in the same experience, but just different perspectives. And so, because a lot of us haven't done the work to rewire our subconscious mind, our brains have our neuroplasticity, you're able to rewire some of that programming, but it involves work. A lot of people haven't learned how to speak the emotional intelligence and how the language of feelings and needs, because they haven't learned how to regulate their own nervous system. And basically all their stuff is just coming out on their children. And so we don't have to stay here. I'm really passionate about helping and supporting adults making these changes, because honestly, children deserve better. And so the way to do that is really just to embody a growth mindset and embrace, being bold and brave and trying new techniques and trying new strategies, and really looking at yourself for like, okay, what are some areas, I can improve on? I can grow into myself a little bit more. Um, and and this is effective for any child, right? Because we're the ones that are the models. And so if we essentially work on ourselves, then our children is going to reap the benefit of it. And so, the bottom line is we can't give our kids what we can't give ourselves. And so if we don't love ourselves unconditionally, if we don't forgive ourselves when we make a mistake and we lose it, right? Then we can't provide that completely for our children. And we can't provide them validation. They're not going to believe us if we don't provide it to ourselves first. And so in this work here, one of the fundamental human core needs that we all share, whether you're a child, a teenager, an adult, someone even at the end of their life, we all share these human core needs. And so there's safety, variety, validation, significance, connection, autonomy, growth, and contribution. And so, this is a human core need. It's not like, oh, I need an iPad or I need this, or, these are emotional needs here. And so in an ideal world, we're able to, give our children access to this at all times. But ideally, the magic is that we have to give them to ourselves first. And so we're really going to look at this parenting thing, a little differently here. And so one of the foundational principles is here is that all behavior, whether it's good or bad, is an expression of a need and whether that need has been met. And so again, all behavior, good or bad, is an expression of a need and one of those core fundamental needs and whether that need has been met. And so let's look how it plays out here, right? Because you can see some of us are living in this pool of unmet needs, right? And if we look at, this is why the coaching is so powerful because we're able to, give people the opportunity to feel seen and heard. And so parents feel that real empathy and significance and connection and autonomy. And so they begin to grow. And then what happens is their children begin to grow. And so if we look at this swirl here from the child to the adult here, adults, let's say they're, child's not getting their needs met. And so what happens is they, maybe they need more connection or they need more autonomy. And so their behavior starts to escalate. They're basically just yelling, right? With their actions that they have a need that's not being met. And children will do this even when they're 17, right? They do it with whatever tools they have at that age to express how they're feeling. And so what happens is the adult's nervous system starts to begin to feel dysregulated, and then what happens? The parent becomes, emotionally reactive because they're desperate for that relief. And so they snap, they yell, they threaten, they send them away, they don't let them go out on Friday night, or they take away the iPad or whatever it is. And so that's the moment here that we really, need to stop and think about, because, whether we revert into that power over type of parenting, we're just really taking action to get our needs met. And that's where we really need to get curious about what needs our child is trying to communicate to us. And so what happens is the child pulls away, right? Because they're feeling that this connection is being removed. They don't feel connected. And they don't want to be sent away, right? They don't want things taken away. And so, they go into disconnection. And then we start to have ineffective communication. We're like, well, you did this and that made me yell, or, we go into lecture mode, or this is why, and so then you start to feel bad, right? You see your child is disconnected, you feel guilty, and then you maybe could even slip into more of a permissiveness to try to woo them back because you realize that connection has been removed. And so this is like a cycle that unfortunately a lot of parents or families are stuck in. And my work as a coach is to really break this pattern. And I'm going to show you that model in just a moment. But I want to share a story. This is just a quick story with my oldest son. He's 17 now, but he was about 7 or 8 at the time. And he is my, as Francesca said, each kid is so different, right? He is my like highly focused, determined child when he's learning something new. So he received a skateboard for his birthday, or I think it was Christmas, I can't remember. And he was really determined to learn how to balance and push himself and ride the skateboard. And so one day, I didn't know, I was probably folding laundry or something in another room. He decided to bring it in the house. And he was going around the counters, and all of a sudden I heard a loud crash.
Recording in progress.
Ooh, I don't know what that was. I heard a loud crash, and I walked into the room. He was laying on the ground, and the skateboard was all the way across the, like, in the hole, like in the wall. There was a huge hole. And so I immediately reacted to him, and I said, "What is wrong with you thinking you could do this in the house? There's a big hole in the wall, and now we have to fix this because you were careless. Give me your skateboard and go to your room." So I clearly didn't handle that well, right? I blamed him for being careless. I shamed him for saying, "What's wrong with you?" And then I punished him and took away his skateboard. So going back to those future skills that we talked about in the beginning, what skills was I modeling? Was I teaching? Was I showing him in that moment when I punished him? Were there any skills there that he was learning from me? When I shamed him, I blamed him, and I punished him. Anyone?
You show frustration.
I definitely showed frustration, but nothing where he can learn from me, right? There was no teaching there. So after a moment, I took a moment to myself to calm down because I felt really bad. And I walked over to him and I said, "Giovanni, can we talk?" And he said, "Yes, mommy." I said, I apologize for yelling at you and overreacting. I love you more than that wall. And mommy did not handle that well. I was completely surprised when I saw you laying on the ground and noticed the hole in the wall. But I know how hard you've been working on learning how to skateboard. And we probably should have talked about this. Like, where would be the best place for you to learn this until you feel comfortable with the balancing? Do you want to help me think of some new places that you can feel safe when you're riding? And he said, "Yes, mommy. Maybe we can walk together and you can hold on to me." So what skills was I teaching him there with the recovery, with the repair? Besides learning drywall, because he did go with my husband the next day to Home Depot to repair the drywall. But what skills was he was he shown and modeled with the repair?
Problem solving. You give him some autonomy, some choices.
Forgiveness.
Your forgiveness, you heard him out. So
Yeah, mistakes happen, right?
mhm.
You made a mistake, mommy made a mistake, but we can talk about it, we can problem solve. Way more skills the second time around, right? Would you agree? Yeah.
Yes.
So repair is a powerful tool. We don't always get it right the first time, right? But we can still clean it up and repair. And learning to regulate your emotions in the beginning is something I needed to work on, right? Um, Coming out to that situation and panicking versus, okay, let's assess the situation. Everybody's alive. We can figure this out. It's just a wall. So the compassionate view here is just to understand, like, whether you sometimes resort to power over or power under, they're just ineffective coping mechanisms, and really to deal with our unmet needs. So essentially, we're unconsciously doing, not knowing what, asking our kids to behave in a way that doesn't upset us. And so my invitation to adults is really to consider turning the focus away from the behaviors for just a minute. It's like we've been driving this wheel, this car, this parenting wheel, right? We're going so fast. Well, let's just gently peel our fingers off that scary wheel. And with a lot of love, let's just take a look at what we can work on. What can we improve on? And it's an extraordinary thing because as we begin to shift and we start, trying different things, maybe making mistakes and learning new ways to express our feelings and communicate more effectively without shaming, without blaming, without, guilt, but rather more from our values and from our family goals. I hear this a lot with my clients early on. They're like, "Oh my gosh, so much is changing." Like, of course it's changing because you're changing, and so your children is seeing that. They really want that cooperation and that peace as much as you do. And so when adults do that work of transforming themselves and really just looking at your child through this clear lens and giving them the space to really, just take risks and try things and make mistakes and let it be okay to learn from. Our children are separate from us. So their choices are not a reflection on us, right? We're here to guide them and to help them learn through those experiences. And so, really, to do this, to going back to those four obstacles, to just really flip those four obstacles onto their heads, parents need to do some work, just really making peace with your parenting past. How are you able to replace some of those limiting beliefs with more empowered beliefs and gain more emotional competency and learn how to regulate your nervous system and then give your kids the tools to co-regulate. Children need they co-regulate up until a good amount of time. And I lean heavily on the work of Marshall Rosenberg, Nonviolent Communication. I recommend that book if you're interested. And it parents need to also know and have the time to sit down and figure out what their values are. How can we teach our kids who to be in the world if we haven't done that work for ourselves? And inquiring what matters to me as a parent or my partner and what doesn't, what's a non-negotiable in our house, and then how do we build that, how do we build boundaries around that so that we have a family ecosystem that we're teaching our children and guiding our children to those values that matter most to us. It's really powerful. And then, of course, my favorite part is just like, how do we have more fun with our kids? How do we play more? How do we access more joy and get silly with them? It really does go by fast. I can tell you, we went on a college tour last weekend. I'm like, oh, it goes by very fast. And so, really, it's it's about it, if we're it's about changing the game that we're playing. And so if you don't like the rules, just make a new game. you know if you look at the traditional type of parenting that maybe a lot of us were raised, um and really how a lot of the world still judges our success as a parent is through this idea, this need that we need to condition and our children must behave a certain way and achieve these radical goals. And that's really a power over in a nutshell. You will conform to my expectation. But the transformational game is we're embracing this role as parents to be a mentor, to be a guide, to be the leader, and not the owner. And we're just going to help our children develop that intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is, when the child has the desire to do the right thing even when no one's looking, based on versus like someone telling you what to do or getting that like approval from someone. It just comes internally, not externally. And so that is the new game. And so with this foundation, once we have this established, then we can start to embrace new strategies, and help build more connection in your home and more cooperation. And so the path to more peace and cooperation is really teaching. The word discipline means to teach. So we're teaching from a clearly articulated, discussed values and goals versus the fear and the control and punishment. And we're working with our children to teach them how to regulate their emotions in their nervous system and co-regulate. And and then we allow our children, right? We increase the autonomy as they grow. We're not going to clamp down, right? When they're needing more autonomy, that's how you get rebellion. We're going to make that leash a little longer and we're going to allow them to feel trusted. And this is going to lead our family into more connection and cooperation and communication. And by nature, children are going to test. They're going to test the limits, right? They're going to push the boundaries. They're evolving little human beings that are learning how to be, adult human beings eventually. And so, really, it's more about embracing this as periods of growth opportunities. So if we see they're pushing a boundary, they're testing a limit, they're not living up to the value that we've taught them, then we're going to kind of look at this through a lens of giving this experience a growth opportunity. And then we're going to work together. We're going to work to get our needs met. We're going to, what are they needing? Do they need more autonomy? Do they need more rest? Are they needing more connection? And then, as the adults, we're going to work on making sure our needs get met as well so that our nervous system can stay regulated and we can clearly be that leader for them. And so guess what? Then another growth opportunity is going to come because as I mentioned earlier, it takes 26, 27 years for the human brain to completely develop. And so as you grow, your child grows and they start to have greater self-esteem and more emotional immaturity and up and up and up you both go. As I mentioned before, I tell my children this all the time, we are growth partners. And so I believe there's no better opportunity in this world to allow our children to be our growth partners by taking the challenge to do the work and becoming that model that you want them to be and where you can meet them and their needs in the most fulfilling ways as possible. There's nobody better, right, in this world to be a better person for than for our children. And so if you would like to dive deeper and learn more about, how you can apply these in your parenting, just reach out to me. Simply just, you can text me or visit my website and book a call, totally complimentary. I hope that you found this workshop to be helpful. I'd love to hear any takeaways or any questions you might have. So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can do that.
This slide starts with.
Does anyone have any big takeaways they'd like to share or any questions? You can either unmute or put it in the chat. Okay, well, if you want to reach out to me, I will put I can put it in the chat.
I have something quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just a quick thing. So as the years go and as my children are getting older, because I have a 23, I have a 20, and then I have a 14 years old. And like I said, that my last child, I think, has the best version of me now. And I've, throughout the years, I'm adjusting myself on how I handle things. I'm not as reactive as I used to be, but when and then I will say this, like when, because life hits and sometimes you just don't have that time to like think and breathe and, just like kind of like put yourself in a safe space mentally or emotionally. So I could still kind of react on things, but not as, the way I used to be. But when I know when I've said something that's like, I shouldn't have said that, or type of thing, I will ponder until like kind of like give me some time to like for myself type of thing. And I will go back and I will be humble enough to apologize. Um, and say what upset me, but then also apologize as to why I was like that, and I shouldn't have reacted that way. So now, knowing that I know I shouldn't have maybe said something that's not really the best way to handle things, I feel apologizing might kind of like not 100% erase it, but it does help out where I think like my older kids too has grown to, like if they say or do something that kind of annoys me, even at this age that they're in, they'll apologize to me. I'm like, oh, wow, they're apologizing? Like, this is news, I'm about to do my happy dance, my head thing to myself. But I just feel like if I show that to them, that I have that humility to apologize to them, they will mirror that as well. But then they'll see also my reaction, because I'm sometimes reactive. So they do that too. So I'm trying to control that, even though they're older. I think I have more patience with younger kids than I do with my older kids. So it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Because to me, since they're older, they're practically adults already. They are adults. They should know better. And then that's in my head is like,
Yeah.
Whose child are you? Where did you come from? So
I totally hear what you're saying. Like my 17-year-old is almost 6'2", and sometimes I look at him like, you should know this. You're huge. And I have to remind myself, his brain still has some cooking to do. And that prefrontal cortex that, is in charge of the planning and the reasoning and it's not completely developed until 25, 26. So even your 23-year-old, which you probably feel like should,
I know, I
up
can't wait for
together.
that age, 25 or
Right.
26.
Yeah.
So
And,
it's fully
it's a
developed.
process. But, thank you for sharing, because that's a real thing, right? Like I like to kind of visualize it as the sink. Like we all have this internal sink inside of us. And when the water is like to the brim, what do we need before it spills out? We need something to release a little bit of the drain to let that water go down, right? So that we don't spill it all over the place. And so that's really important to be able to communicate that. And that's the emotional intelligence that I teach for the whole family. It's like, first of all, how do you check yourself and track your nervous system when you are about to spill, and access a pause button so that you can then communicate like, you know what? I need a little break. Let's go back to this conversation in 5 minutes. And mommy is going to go take a quick break. I'm going to go put water in my face. I'm going to do some breathing like we did earlier in the workshop. I hold my tension here. So I always give myself like a little quick massage. How do we access that presence so that we can come back and we can communicate effectively? And we can model that skill for them to do the same. But I love how, we all, like I mentioned in the skateboard story, we all have those moments that don't go the way we want them to for whatever reason, but we're able to repair, right? We're able to apologize, we're able to express, and model that forgiveness and that humility, like you said, for our children. And it seems like you're doing that, and your children are also reciprocating it as well. It's definitely a practice because, like you said, sometimes your mind goes straight to like, well, they should know, or I repeated, I told them yesterday, and like, how can they not remember? You know, and so we get caught up in that, and that kind of like starts to fuel ourselves. Um, but sometimes we just need that pause, right? Just to kind
Yeah.
of access that presence.
Yep.
That was great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else have a question or a comment? Anything you took away from our time together? Well, I thank you so much for coming. You could be doing anything on a Tuesday night and you're here. So that just shows how invested you are in your family. And again, if you have any questions, send me an email or a text or anything. And I hope everyone has a great night. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye.
Hi. Sorry, I monopolized it.
No, it was a very quiet group.
It was very quiet. So I was like, okay, let me put
Yeah.
it.
I've never had a group that quiet ever. So thank you for jumping
Yeah.
in.
Well, it was a small group. I know